Welcome back to another episode of the Strive for 25 podcast. And I've got an amazing guest on today, and I cannot wait for this interview. I've been looking forward to this for a while now. And I actually just met Nick this past week in Columbus, but entrepreneur, business owner, top 2% podcaster, soon to be author. And this gentleman, not even 30 years old yet, maybe you're 30 yet, but interviewed the
No,
likes of
29.
29, yeah. Interviewed the likes of a 𝐂𝐎𝐍𝐍𝐄𝐎, a Cardone, a Patrick Bet-David, a Russell Brunson. That's your first or second interview, I think. But Nick, thank you so much for making time for us today.
Yeah, man, I'm excited that you were willing to have me on the show. I'm excited that we had the chance to meet before recording because it'll probably make this a little bit more interesting for your audience. And listen, let's follow your curiosity. I'm an open book, pun intended, and I'm happy to talk about whatever you want today.
So the first thing I want to ask you is your business, right? In your interview with Alex Hormozi earlier in the year, you mentioned that in 2022, you were doing $10,000 a month, maybe along the way. And then you started digging into his book, $100 million offer. And maybe a year later, into the beginning of 23, your business started doing maybe 30K a month, which is a pretty badass business, also a rapid incline. But what do you guys do? What is Book Thinkers for the audience out there?
Yeah, man. And we just had our first 60K month last month. So Book Thinkers is a digital marketing agency for nonfiction authors. And we love to help authors promote and market their books. There are three core services that make up most of our revenue. Number one, we do short form video content. So we'll actually fly out with the cameras and the lighting and help an author turn their physical book into 50 to 100 pieces of short form video content for social media. Now that works best if the book is a lead mechanism for some type of higher ticket complementary product or service like coaching, consulting, speaking, those sorts of things. And then we go back and we edit all of those videos. We add captions, background music, animations, the whole 9 yards. Number two, podcast booking. So we can place an author on up to 100 podcasts in their niche to talk directly to their target client to sell books. And again, any type of coaching, consulting, speaking that they've got going on. And then number three, we have a very large community of nonfiction readers. It's about 150,000 on Instagram and another 40 or 50,000 on the other platforms. And they look for a new book recommendation every day. So we're paid by authors and publishers to promote and market books to our audience. And our audience, they love that kind of stuff. They don't care if it's paid. They just want to see a new book every day and learn about what's inside of that book. So that's my business. We have 10 people on my team that support a couple hundred authors a year now. And yeah, it's a growing business, man. I love every second of it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Just, speaking of the event, it impacted me in so many ways, and maybe I'll share a little bit about that a little bit later. I look at a book differently because of that event and the way that you guys structured the event and the authors that you had some pretty badass people that were there and speakers and whatnot. But for our listeners, can you explain, in your words, what does a book mean to you and why is it so important?
Well, when I was growing up, I wasn't much of a reader. I was more of the athlete stereotype, not much of the academic stuff going on in my head. And so I wasn't a reader, which surprises a lot of people. But in my late teens, early 20s, I took an internship going into my senior year of college. So I guess I was about 20. And at that internship, my boss introduced me to the world of podcasting, conversations just like this, where a host would interview a series of guests, and those guests would talk about what they did to become successful. And I had about an hour commute to and from that office every day. So I listened to a lot of podcasts. And what I realized over and over and over and over again was that a lot of these super successful people gave at least some credit for their success to the early books that they had read. So I just kind of had this moment one day where I was like, wow, if I choose not to read these books that condense decades of valuable information into days of reading, then I'm choosing to live under my potential. Because these people are telling me this is how you do it, and I'm not doing it. So I went to my local Barnes and Noble and I picked up some books. And I mean, they changed everything for me in the first couple of months. I went from insecure to secure and confident. I went from full of ego to focused on service and impact. I went from financially illiterate to investing in multifamily properties almost overnight. And I was like, well, if that can happen after just a few months of reading and implementing books, I wonder what other areas of my life can improve. And so what does a book mean to me? Like they say that your purpose comes from your pain. I felt a lot of pain and confusion, solved it with books. My purpose is to go back and help other people connect with the right books at the right time so they can change their life in the right way. And yeah, felt good answering that because that's how much these books mean to me. They're everything. As you mentioned, I'm 29 years old. I'm healthy and wealthy and I'm happy. And I enjoy the passage of time. And unfortunately, so many people don't have the chance to do that. And I'm like, the answer's right here for 20 bucks in a few hours of your time. What do you mean? Come on, let's go. Get rid of the pain. So they mean everything.
So recently, I was on a podcast here actually in St. Louis, and I was talking about pushing the "I'll do it tomorrow" button. And your dreams die in the fringes. Like, okay, I got a job, I got a 9 to 5, maybe I have a family, and like, I know I need to be doing this thing to help me build the stream or build this business or whatever it is. And okay, 8 o'clock hits, 9 o'clock hits, and I should be doing that, but I'll just do it tomorrow. And if that happened over and over, soon enough, those dreams they'll die and they'll fade away. And kind of going back to the word pain, right? For me personally, unfortunately, pain was something that pushed me out of my comfort zone to kind of do some of these things that were, and literally what we're talking about right now, doing a podcast. And you mentioned a pain that you were enduring, I guess, in those early years that push you into this, drive to read these books and implement. And that's kind of back to the book, Rise of the Reader, implementation and implementing the information in these books. But what was that pain early on that was pushing you towards this lane?
I mean, so much of it, I think so late teens, early 20s, I'm a business student. I'm working in a business, but I don't know anything about money. I don't know anything about how it works, how you invest it. And so I shy away from these conversations when they get brought up. All these other high-powered kids running around with their 4.0s, and I'm not a very good student. They're talking about, oh, I'm going to go work at this company, that company, big name on a business card. And I was like, well, I want to be part of those conversations, but I don't know how to interact with these people. So I start reading these books and I start to gain a little bit more confidence and I start to lead these conversations. And funny enough, I find very early on that one of the least successful pathways is going to work for a big company right out of school, because you'll end up getting coffee for a few years and, you're not going to learn a lot doing that. Whereas if you go to work for a small company and you're in these really important meetings on day one, because you're in a small company, you can learn so much faster. So I'm happy that I started reading those books and I started to learn that, because what I thought I wanted, I didn't actually want. So that was a lot of fun. But I mean, that was some of that pain, man. It's just like insecurity. And these books just started to solve things for me. And what was interesting about that software company that I took the internship at and ultimately a full-time job at right out of school before going full-time into Book Thinkers was that each and every time I would sell a software package to a company, they would have to spend a few weeks to a few months implementing it. And so here I am spending a few weeks to a few months implementing each book that I read. And I think that I naturally just adopted like what I was selling. And I think I implemented it in my own life, because most people, number one, if anybody in today's audience is actively reading and listening to books and listening to podcasts, pat yourself on the back, because most people never read another book after they graduate high school or college. It's another thing to take notes and highlight the most important information, maybe even rewrite it. That's a totally separate thing. A small portion of people do that. And then the ones that actually take action on it, implement it into their lives. I mean, now you're talking 1% of people or less. And so, yeah, it was just different behavior, but it was working really well. And I was in a sales role. So I was reading and implementing sales and marketing and communication and persuasion and negotiation books. And I was watching myself make more money immediately. So it was like this quantifiable return on reading these books. And that's why I think, there's this quote I've been referencing a lot recently because I love it so much. It's a Napoleon Hill quote. It says, action is the real measure of intelligence. I took action. I read the book and I took action on it. I did what they told me to do. If 𝐂𝐎𝐍𝐍𝐄𝐓 in his mid 30s has 250 million under management, because of what he talks about in here, if I read it, of course I can improve my life. That kind of thing.
Totally. So you have this job, you're selling software, helping with the implementation. And then now we're talking today, you have, a fast growing company, Book Thinkers, and now a book coming out and all these relationships that you build. Because the event that I witnessed, that was all built on stacking of relationships and implementation and helping people along the way. And your business, I think, is 7 years old.
Yes.
So talk us through kind of what was going on in the job and why you decided to take that leap of faith and say, hey, I can go do something bigger than just somebody else's company, build your own dream.
I always knew that I wanted to start my own business because I value personal flexibility and impact over income. And you could do that when you're in control. So I love traveling the world internationally. I love taking time off and going to the gym or focusing on my health or my happiness or getting lunch with my wife in the middle of the day, whatever it is. So I knew that I wasn't going to be the best employee, but I also knew in the beginning that I wasn't capable of starting and growing my own business because I didn't have the money for it. In Michael Gerber's book, The E-Myth Revisited, he says that 95% of small businesses fail in the first 5 years. Why? Because they run out of money. So I knew I needed a full-time job for a little while. So I got into sales where my effort into the funnel led to money out of the funnel. What I've always thought was goofy about a normal 9 to 5 from my own perspective, I'm not hating. Like, let's say you're bagging groceries and there's somebody else bagging groceries at half the speed, but you're both getting paid hourly. So you're twice as efficient for the business, but you're getting paid the same amount. That never made any sense to me. So I found a performance-driven job where I could work really hard and make a bunch of money. And I would funnel that money into my side hustle. And I wanted to jump. I wanted to jump so bad, so many different times. But I had this mentor who told me, Nick, you can't jump off the cliff and build the parachute on the way down, which is what I wanted to do. Because you'll operate from a place of scarcity. You'll negotiate on your values. You'll discount your services. It's going to bleed into your sales pitches and stuff. Just stick it around. Keep the full-time job. Automate as much of it as you can and create more certainty before you make the jump. I'm really happy that I did. And what's unique, Joel, about my story is that Book Thinkers had full-time employees and the business was doing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year before I quit my job. Which is so goofy when you say it like that, but that's how I didn't want to fail. I wanted certainty, and that's how I developed certainty. Now, one of the cool things was that my full-time job at the time, which towards the end was only a couple hours a day max, but my full-time job taught me a skill set that was transferable directly into my side hustle. I think that's a really important note for people. It wasn't totally disconnected. I was learning about sales, small business, flying around the country, closing deals, making sales presentations. And all that helped me grow my business. Because you could have the coolest product ever, but if nobody knows about it, it's not going to generate any money for you. So what was the decision like when I decided to finally jump? I'll try to tell a story in about a minute because it could be a long story. I'm in LA, and in the morning, I interview Steven Pressfield, the author of a bunch of books. He's a total OG. He's 80 years old. He wrote a book called The War of Art, sold millions of copies. Legend of Bagger Vance got turned into a movie. Will Smith, Matt Damon acted in it. Like, totally a cool dude. We're sitting at his house. He lives on the top of a mountain in Malibu. It's so quiet, even though it sits above the PCH, that you can't even tell there's a highway down there. It's just beautiful. And he's talking about how I'm interviewing him for our podcast. And he's talking about how he's always paid attention to signs, to karma. And he would say, if I found a penny face up, best day of my life. 2 pennies, going to change the world that day. He always just paid attention to omens and things. And we had a great conversation and it felt, man, this is what I should be doing with 100% of my attention because it was just such a cool conversation. Later that day, I spent 5 or 6 hours with Lewis Howes. He breaks down the business, makes a bunch of recommendations. He's just the coolest guy ever. Interview him for the podcast. That night, I'm walking around outside of my hotel with Luke on my team. And I'm like, I really think this is the time to jump, but I just need a sign. I want to be doing this every day. And as I say that, we're on the third lap around this little fenced area. And I look down as I'm saying it, and there's a penny heads up on the ground. And I know it sounds kind of goofy, but I pick up the penny and it's heads up, and I'm like, I'm going to quit on Monday. I'm going to quit on Monday. I'm going to turn in my resignation. I'm going full time into Book Thinkers. And to wrap this story up, and I still have that penny, by the way, but to wrap this story up, the next month, Book Thinkers doubled its revenue. And it wasn't because I had more time into Book Thinkers. I was only working a couple hours a day max by the time that I quit that other job. But it was almost like the universe was rewarding me for finally being courageous enough to actually take the jump and to commit to the business and to commit to impacting people in a positive way. And I could never have expected that, but I'm so happy that I did make that jump. And so that's what it looked like for me. It's totally different than a lot of other people's stories. Everybody's got a unique way that they look at that, but it was cool, full circle.
Yeah, I mean, that story, the sign, right, makes me think of Shane Baldwin, the interview you had with him, and not to spoil anything, but the 5 years, going through his journey of, issues with the law and spending time. And he had that dream of, hey, I'm going to be in here for 5 years. And, it all works out to where he's there for 5 years. And the reason
did you get to chat with Shane at the event?
I did. I was so pumped up to meet him, hearing his quick story, but just we jived pretty well. And just saw, a similar type of energy of kind of his purpose. So yeah, I was actually messaging with him this morning.
Oh, good.
Yeah. But the reason I bring that up is that, he chose to look at a negative and turn it into a positive, and to do that every single day. He talked about, almost, killing himself, right? And then fell back onto positive thinking and, falling forward instead of falling backward. The negatives, the pain, you chose to push and dive into books and looking for a solution and taking and receiving the information and then implementing. And there's obviously people that struggle with that or can't do that. Is that something that you were born with, something you learned, something that affected you along the way, that pushed you to that mindset?
When I realized I had all this unfulfilled potential, I was at a stage in my life where I was really motivated to embrace that discomfort. Speaking about communication for a minute, when I was younger, I had a lot of social anxiety. I mean, if I was in English class and I had to read a paragraph out loud, like those little circles that we used to do, I'd count ahead the number of people and I'd practice my paragraph. Worst thing ever was when the teacher would tell somebody else to read an extra paragraph or something and mess me up. And I wasn't a great communicator, so I had a lot of insecurity around speaking out loud. Every sentence was littered with ums and ahs and so's and buts, and I was shy and timid. And so what did I do to overcome that? I took a job essentially where I ran my own house painting business for 2 summers during college. And I had to go door to door and communicate with homeowners, try to set up a free estimate where I could come back and sell them on painting their house. So that was a lot of small steps in the right direction. Then I take this internship, which starts on the phones and then eventually translates into flying around and making sales presentations. I went to Toastmasters. I took a public speaking class in college. I read a dozen books on communication and public speaking. Then I start this channel, Book Thinkers, where I start first writing out book reviews and then displaying them with my voice on video. And you can't get to 1,000 videos without your first 999, and we're well over 1,000. Then I start a podcast where I can start to communicate with people that terrify me. You know how weird it is being on with Russell Brunson in your first episode or Grant Cardone in your 9th episode? It was intimidating, but I was forced to embrace that discomfort, never overextend myself. I wasn't on a stage with 10,000 people when I should have been knocking on doors. I was knocking on doors. And so little steps in the right direction over a long period of time. And now, as you mentioned, from your perspective, even though inside it was probably a little different for me, but at our event the other day, I was cool, calm, and collected by the end of the day on stage, interviewing super successful, famous authors and stuff in front of a room full of people. And that's the result of embracing discomfort, small little steps over a period of 7 or 8 years. And I think we could all do that. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. small little bite. And so I don't know if I was born with embracing discomfort, because when I look back at, I loved high school football, but I was so timid. And when I think back to, man, if only I had the head on my shoulders now, or back then that I do now, it would have been a completely different person. So I don't think I was always naturally like that. I think I just built it up with a series of small, tiny little actions. And that public speaking or the ability to communicate example, display more charisma, that's just one example of dozens of different areas of my life that I've gone through that same process of slowly improving things.
And I'm back to the journey of starting the business. What was your first product that you were selling?
A mobile application that could help readers retain and implement more from the books they're reading. But long story short, it failed, and it cost me a ton of money as a young 20-something who probably wished he saved that money for the bars or something at the time. We spent tens of thousands of dollars outsourcing the build of a mobile application to a company in Argentina that ultimately fell apart. The app fell apart. The business relationships fell apart. And, I even paid with a different person a second attempt at building a mobile application, and that one still isn't out yet. So it won't be coming out, by the way. So, when I look at Book Thinkers, I see 9 or 10 different businesses that failed along the way, and really only one that has succeeded or shown some success so far. So it's just, it goes back to that lesson that the road to success and failure, they are the same road. You just have to persevere a little bit farther, maybe dodge a few more obstacles.
That's crazy. 8 or 9 roads led to
masterminds, paid book clubs, nothing worked.
So when did you realize that you had something that was going to work?
Well, I always knew that in anticipation of a mobile app or a mastermind or a paid book club or whatever, that I would need an audience to sell it to. So the only through line of success came from posting social media reviews. And eventually, when that audience got big enough, authors started to reach out and say, hey, Nick, my target reader for the book is in your audience. And so I'd like to pay you for a book review. And the first couple of times that happened, I was like, whoa, that's so crazy. $50 here and there to get paid to do something I was already doing for free, But I started asking good questions. Hey, is there anything else that I could help with related to book PR, book marketing, podcasting, social media content, management? You name it, and I'll try it. And a lot of those book marketing things also failed. But the things that stayed consistent, the 3 things that we kicked off the episode with, short form video content, podcast booking, and book reviews, they move books, especially books that have higher ticket complementary products and services attached to them. So when did I start to see some success? I think that when the first dollar went from somebody else's bank account to mine, I was like, finally, proof of concept, something that's going to work. And those book reviews, they used to be $50 for a couple of posts. Now they're thousands of dollars for a couple of posts. Same action, reading a book and posting it, but wildly different outcome and results because I stayed consistently posting for years. Again, another one of those examples of the compound effect. Now, when I post a book, I could sell anywhere between, it's such a wide range. I could sell anywhere between no books or thousands of books with a post, which is kind of crazy.
So if you go backwards in time and posting the book reviews, and then you started to get actual sales, how many followers did you have at that point, or just a ballpark?
I think I had maybe just short of 10,000. And the way that I was able to get about 10,000 followers in a relatively short period of time was by leveraging a strategy that Gary Vee teaches called the $80 strategy. Are you familiar with it?
No, I'm not, but maybe.
Okay, so check. This is really cool. And I think everybody listening today should use this to grow a bigger social following. You know the saying or the phrase, 2 cents, your 2 cents? Like when you just provide value, here's my 2 cents. So what Gary says is go into a social media platform like Instagram and search a hashtag related to your target customer. So for me, maybe I'll jump on and I'll search hashtag rich dad, poor dad, right? Because if somebody likes Rich Dad Poor Dad, they'll probably like the rest of my content. And then you can filter those hashtags by trending. And then you go into the top 9 trending posts on one hashtag and you leave your genuine 2 cents. Not, hey, follow me, I'm so cool. But just if somebody posted, oh, wow, first time reading this book, has anybody else read it? Leave your 2 cents. Oh, I read this. Dude, it's such a good book. And then after this, you should read Cash Flow Quadrant because it's even better. Robert Kiyosaki's the man. And then every other comment in that post. A couple of things are going to happen. Number one, you're going to comment on that person's post and they're going to say, who the heck is this Joel guy? I've never seen him before. And they're going to click to your profile. And if you're providing value and you're related to the target kind of post, they might follow you. If you like every other comment in that post, which only takes 2 seconds, you'll get a bunch of additional impressions. And because that post is trending, other people will probably see your comment because you're the only one that wrote a paragraph. Everybody else wrote a fire emoji, and they weight that. They want to stack the positive comments up top. And okay, so let's say you do that across all 9 and you do it for 10 hashtags a day. That's how you get to $1.80. That's how he kind of says it. So you're leaving 2 cents on 90 posts a day, and they're all trending. So subconsciously, you're starting to see what works in your space. What does trending content look like? How do I create a viral post that other people want to comment on? And if you do that for a few months, I mean, let's do the math real quick. Let's say that you comment on 90 posts a day for 90 days straight. That's 8,100 pieces of content that you'll have consumed, commented on, liked all of that stuff. And a lot of those people are going to follow you. And they're your target. They're going to engage in your stuff because you're filtering by hashtags. You're not commenting on something unrelated. The secret to that activity is that it takes a lot of time and work up front. But the more followers you have, the more likely the next person is to follow you because there's this perceived level of credibility the more followers you have. So birds of a feather fly together, flock together,
Flock
whatever
together,
that
yeah.
saying is. Yeah, flock together. So it's like the same action, again, the same action of commenting on somebody else's post. When I only had 500 followers, maybe 1 in 10 would follow me. But now if I do that with 150,000 followers, 9 out of 10 follow me. So you got to stick in there. You got to do it for a long period of time. But I just built up this organic, really engaged audience over a long period of time to get to that mark of 10,000. Maybe it took a year or 2 of doing that. I don't remember, but yeah, I was, and it's also cool just networking with people online. Like if you can make it fun, if you can make it a game, it's a really fun way to do it.
So quick question about the networking online. This is something that I learned just kind of through my own journey is, finding your own tribe, people that think similar, like you mentioned with the hashtags and finding people that are already interested in your topic. But finding people that are like-minded, the internet obviously has no borders. So, but there's people around you in your life, people that maybe you went to school with or family or friends or acquaintances or whatever. And as you're building this business and building your platform and building your audience, people are seeing what you're doing, and the gravity of what you're doing maybe becomes more apparent to people around you. Then you have the whole saying like, hey, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him or her drink. Sorry. Are there people in your circle that started to kind of see what you're doing and also join in and try to build something on their own or build something along with you?
Yes. And I tried to make that happen. So we are the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with, right? And if you outgrow everybody, they'll just kind of pull you back down. And so reading that Jim Rohn line over and over again, I thought, okay, I've got to rise with my friends. So one of the strategies that I talk about in my book, Rise of the Reader, is to build an accountability group with your most motivated friends and meet with them on a weekly basis and talk about these subjects, growing businesses, hosting podcasts, the books you're reading, your goals for the year, what you can do to support them, ask good questions, hold people accountable. And so that's what I did. I reached out to my friends and we built these accountability groups and we met and we talked and we pushed each other. And as a result, you probably got a chance to meet a couple of my buddies that were in those early accountability groups with me at my event. And along the way, you'll adopt some new friends too. So I'll just throw a couple of tips out there for people. If you are the most motivated person in your friend group and you don't have anybody around you that you think would want to be in an accountability group, one of two things. Number one, go into the comment section of your favorite influencer and DM a bunch of the other people that are engaged. 𝐂𝐎𝐍𝐍𝐄𝐓 just put out this book, $100 Million Leads. If you jumped into the comment section of his book, into his Instagram posts, and you started DMing people who are also saying, oh, I just got my copy. And you said, hey, you want to read this with me and chat about it on a weekly basis? You DM enough people, if you were going to say yes, they're going to become your tribe. The other thing you could do is really think about your friend group. Is there somebody who said they were going to run a marathon 2 years ago, but never did? Maybe you reach out and say, hey, can I hold you accountable to getting back on that, on that momentum? We could talk about it weekly. Or did you gift a copy of Rich Dad Poor Dad to somebody 2 years ago and they never read it? Maybe you can hit them up and say, hey, can I hold you accountable to reading that? Because I know it will help solve a problem in your life. And you can start to build this accountability group by grabbing people from different areas of your life and kind of putting them all in the same room together. And listen, Napoleon Hill says this too. When multiple minds are in the same room, focused on the same idea, they create kind of like this third mind. It's 1 + 1 = 3 because you've got this momentum and you're moving together. And that's a really cool place to be.
The energy feeds off of each other, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So speaking of your friend group, Luke, John are people that I met, and also your brother Chandler, who I met. And one of the things that stands out when I talked to him that just hit me, we were talking about a bunch of different things that he was, doing in his world, and just he loved the opportunity to be a part of this journey, this business. And the one word he used was freedom. The freedom to be able to go do the things he loves, which is be in nature, and they soak it all in and do his runs every single day. He runs a mile every single day. That's one of the habits that he's built. And that word freedom is something that I think, people in their teens or 20s or 30s is something that's more and more at the top of their forefront of their mind and their consciousness. And obviously that means different things to different people, but freedom to build your own dream, freedom to spend time how you want to spend it. My platform, Strive for 25, it's all about, hey, how does the everyday person get ahead, build wealth, and march towards their dreams? And, the cost of living has gone up so much in the last few years alone that a lot of people are struggling. And, my solution to this problem is, hey, well, cutting and budgeting alone is not going to be the answer, but I'm seeing people do very creative things to be able to increase income, to be able to then save more money, then be able to maybe invest. So if you're talking to somebody that's out there about the process of increasing income or finding a skill or finding a lane to be able to build something and try to be able to get ahead, what comes to mind is any advice or tips?
Yeah, I recommend reading and implementing the book Built to Serve by Evan Carmichael. Evan's an author, YouTuber, mentor, sort of friend now. And in his book, Built to Serve, he helps you articulate your purpose, your reason for being here. And I love his framework. It's called Who, Why, How. So your who is your one word. It's your purpose for being here. For me, it's action and progress. When I take action and make progress in my health, my wealth, my happiness, I sleep better. And when I help other people take action and make progress in their health, wealth, or happiness, I sleep better. So it fulfills me. It genuinely does. Why? Because your purpose comes from your pain. So who, why, how? I was in this very confusing place. Books solved that for me. Now I'm in this awesome place, and I want to go back and help other people who are dealing with that same uncertainty. That's my why. And your how. How do I do that? The right book at the right time can change somebody's life. So I make book recommendations on Book Thinkers. I interview cool authors on my podcast. I host events now. First time I could say that. And I support authors in helping them get their message out. So the right book in the right hands changes the right life. And Evan's book, it sounds so simple, but I didn't know any of that back then until I read his book. And then it gave me the language to articulate it. And that language helped me identify opportunities to implement it. And for people like you, Joel, to go out there and introduce my work to people and be able to say, oh, I know what Nick does and what his purpose is. So articulating that is tough. Evan's book has a series of exercises, and they're really fun and creative. He'll ask you questions like, who is your favorite grade school teacher and why? How does that relate to your purpose? You've got to read his book to find out. So that's my recommendation, is figure out what fuels you. And it might be different than what you think. A lot of people say, well, my passion is underwater basket weaving. I can never build a business there. Well, maybe that's not the passion that you're going to end up with once you read his book. It's pretty cool.
So now let's talk about your book, because kind of takes all these different things. How do you take all this information and then be able to actually implement it? And I'm going to say this first, that, growth is not linear. It's exponential, right? I mean, Russell Brunson 15 years ago, when he was selling potato guns, no one knew who he was, right? And you fast forward the clock, and now he's the biggest thing in terms of ClickFunnels and all of the marketing he does. And here we are talking about, you and your first book and the relationships that you built in your podcast. And, I asked you this, earlier, fast forward the clock 5 years, what do you think this could be? And one thing I'm going to just say out loud is that, like, the relationships, the people that you interviewed, like we said, Hormozi, Cardone, Patrick Bet-David. I mean, some of these names, if you're in that world and now they know you, who you are, like, all these other things, that all these possibilities and opportunities open up, that doors wouldn't have been open without those earlier steps. And so, I just can't wait to see the journey of the business. So what I'm telling the audience out there is that in a year or 2 or 3, if you don't know this person, Nick Hutchison, you're going to, because stuff is going to keep going and building and growing. So the book, where can they find it? Where can they find you again on social media?
Yeah, the book is Rise of the Reader: Strategies for Mastering Your Reading Habits and Applying What You Learn. Remember, action is the real measure of intelligence. If you read a book and you choose not to take action, nothing's going to happen. But if you read a book and you take action by leveraging the strategies in my book, good things happen, like Joel's kind of pointing out. And listen, man, can I share a couple of funny things about those names that you mentioned?
Hell yeah, let's do it.
There's this fun metaphor that I like to use every so often. It's going to sound kind of goofy up front, but you'll get the point in a minute. So the hot girl at the bar, every guy there is looking at her and they're like, oh, I'm going to get rejected, so I'm not even going to try, right? And so the result is nobody goes up and talks to her. And at the end of the night, she's the one that feels insecure because literally nobody talked to her. And now she's, oh, I'm ugly or whatever. Nobody wants to talk to me. And the same thing happens with these social media personalities or these successful business people, the Cardones, the Hormozis. Not in every scenario, but most people don't try. Most podcasters don't reach out because the perceived likelihood of a no is so high that they just say it's not even worth typing up the message. When Book Thinkers had like 20K on IG, I got not a million. I got 50 to 100 messages a day. I used to literally spend an hour or 2 every night answering DMs. Now I've got about 150K. Crickets, couple DMs a day. And I ask people when they find, I'll meet somebody at a conference. Oh, I've been following you for years, man. Your book recommendations have changed everything. And I've been meaning to ask you this question. Well, why didn't you just DM me? Well, you have 150K. I didn't think you'd say yes. Well, nobody's messaging me. One more example about this. I got coffee one day with this guy, Anthony Lawley, real estate guy out of Brooklyn, New York. And I was in New York on business for that software company. Book Thinkers was still a side hustle. He had just exited a portfolio of 100 million and he was liquid. And I was like, that's the coolest thing ever. So I asked him to coffee and he said yes. And we're sitting there talking. And I was like, hey, man, I just got to ask, like, why'd you say yes? Like, why are you spending your time with me? And nobody's ever asked. What do you mean nobody's ever asked? You have all these followers. You're famous. You wrote a book on real estate. You just had this public exit moment. Nobody DM'd you to ask you for coffee. You live at the biggest city in the US and he's nobody. So all of that is just to say that these people, now you can't just DM them and they'll come on your podcast. Sometimes that works, but you got to be a little creative. I have other tips that I could share, but ask, and then you can borrow their credibility because trust is transitive. If you trust Alex and Alex trusts me because we're seen together on a podcast, then you'll trust me too. And that's the fastest way to grow your credibility in your audience is to stand on their shoulders or stand with them. And it's not as hard as you think, like the hot girl at the bar metaphor. They're not getting hit up as much as you think because 99% of people are also, You're not going to answer.
You mentioned something earlier too. I think it's important to just restate is you mentioned, early on in your journey, I was coming from a place of ego and then serving, the servant mindset. And that's kind of the same thing with Hormozi, right? I mean, his book, 100 million offer, you know, he was been giving his entire blueprint for years. He was selling that book for $3 on Amazon, trying to give it away. Same thing with all of his platforms and his company, acquisition.com. It's all built to be able to purchase a company or acquire a company that's say 10 million and scale them to 100 million. And it's something that, I've only been on this journey for literally 12 or 14 months. So I'm still trying to figure things out, right? But every day I'm working towards my goal, working towards the plan of building this business on the side of my mortgage business. The mindset of giving and giving. Is there an example of something that you did early on or still do that's helped your business grow?
Yeah, for sure. Gary Vee says jab, right hook. And I bring him up a lot, not a big fan of his, but I'm a big fan of what he's taught me. So jab, right hook kind of means this. If you're in a boxing ring, why do you throw a jab? You throw a jab to kind of learn a little bit more about how your opponent's going to react. You throw a jab to make a little bit of contact so that you can eventually set up a right hook. That's your home run point. Bam. And you want it to land. So your jab is positioning, your right hook, boom, that's the knockout. What Gary says is when you get on social media, too many people just try to throw right hooks. They're like, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. You got to get out there and jab for a while. Maybe you got to jab hundreds of times in a row. And then once you throw that right hook, your audience is bought in. You've already provided so much free value that of course they'll buy your book or your course. And so I love that lesson. Yes, I'm out there providing value. And, I just posted about our book just on our stories yesterday, really for the first time, and announced it for the first time at this event. And it hit #1 new release in a couple of categories that the book is in. And that's because I'm not, I'm out there pushing books, other people's books kind of a lot, but, I've never pushed anything of myself to our audience of readers. I mean, authors is different, but so yeah, I think it works. And I think that's a good way to think about things.
Part of the reason that I asked that question also is giving, right? Social media, in your opinion, if you haven't started your journey, is it too late?
No. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, for sure. But the second best time is today. That's an old Chinese proverb that I've read a few times. And it's a good reminder. Start today. Billions of monthly active users on all of these platforms. Your target customer in any business is also on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and YouTube, at least one of them. And so if you're not putting out content and they're not consuming it, they're consuming somebody else's content. So yeah, get on social media.
Patrick Bet David, what's something that stands out about your experiences, talking to him and spending time with him?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about this before we press record. When I went to record with him, this is pretty funny. One of the world's top podcasters, super famous, says yes for some reason. Probably because not a lot of people are reaching out. So we go to his office and they let us in maybe an hour early to set up. Well, our whole setup was 2 iPhones on tripods and one little mic between us that actually wasn't connected to anything because it didn't work and we didn't have the right cords. So Patrick walks in and he's, this is your setup, 2 iPhones? And I'm like, yes. And he's, dude, I love that. Let's go. Good hustle, blah, blah, blah. So we recorded, I don't know how long the show was, like an hour or something. And afterwards, we press done and he looks at the time and he's, oh, I have an hour or something. What can I help with? I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. And he just kind of sat back and we just talked about my vision for the business and what we were working on and how he would improve it if he was in my shoes. And never checked a phone, never checked any notifications. His team never bothered him. He was totally relaxed, totally professional, super helpful off camera, cracking a bunch of jokes, just like the most likable guy that you could ever be around. And so these superstar people, like he just sold a business for a few $100 million. Just a normal dude who has a good heart and wants to help people, wants to get rid of injustice and stuff. And so, yeah, it's so funny to think about. He could have been like, how'd you let these guys in the door with a couple of iPhones? Who are these punks? but instead he was like, super cool, respect the hustle, let's go, It was just, it was awesome.
And that was 2020 or 21 maybe?
Yeah.
Hell yeah. From a standpoint of his next thing, right? He's ownership of the Yankees, right? Are you a Red Sox fan?
I am. Yeah.
So,
I'm not a huge baseball fan in general, but I did just
okay.
go to a Red Sox game a couple of weeks ago.
Okay. So if he invites you to the stadium and asks you to his box and asks you to put on a Yankees hat, are you saying yes or no?
In that scenario, I'm saying yes, because if you wear a Red Sox hat in a Yankees stadium, you're asking for trouble anyway. Maybe I'll just go not wearing it. Maybe I'll wear a valuetainment hat or something so that he can't tell me to take it off. I'm doing something risky this weekend. One of my customers at Book Thinkers, his name is 𝐂𝐎𝐓𝐇. He's the fullback of the Miami Dolphins. Miami's in Foxborough this weekend, and I'm going to wear an 𝐂𝐎𝐓𝐇 jersey into Foxborough and just see what happens. I'll get heckled by all my own people because they're all going to be like, get out of here, you Miami fan, go back to Florida, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to be like, I'm one of you, don't hit me. Because New England sports, and same with Yankee Stadium, I would imagine, it gets rough. Like, you don't want to wear the wrong colors or the wrong team logos into those stadiums.
Oh no, yeah, yeah. I mean, not to bring up any shit, but yeah, that Dodgers Giants, relationship is turned deadly. So yeah, you got to be careful. We talked about the book, the business, the podcast. We're coming up on time here. What's the next goal? What's the next mission that you're on?
I want to do more of the same. I want to enjoy the passage of time. I want to be in the present moment as often as possible. I enjoy my life, man. And whenever I'm pushed to think about a vision of the future that's really different from today, I feel a lot of resistance from that, because I was wondering, like, why is that? Like, why can't I commit to a vision? But I think it's because I don't want anything that's very different from what I have today, which I'm going to tie back to the book thing. We're reading all of these books so that we can become healthy, wealthy, and happy. So at some point, you're supposed to hit that outcome, right? And you're supposed to live in the present moment and enjoy things. You're not supposed to have a future that's so incredibly different from where you are today. And so what do I want? I want more impact. I want to impact more authors, more readers. I want to host more events. I want to make more money. I want to travel to more countries, but I'm already doing a lot of that. So I just want to do it at a bigger scale. In The Go-Giver by Bob Burg and John David Mann, talking about giving, he says, giving and receiving, it's a reciprocal relationship. The more you give, the more you can receive. The more you can receive, the more you can give. And it's kind of like this forever little cycle. And yeah, I'm going through that cycle right now. I want to give more, I want to receive more, and vice versa.
I love it. I love it. Any other last piece of advice that you heard from somebody on the way that just stands out or just hits you differently? That, I didn't expect that.
Realizing that our problems are not unique to us is really important. So many times I've heard people say, well, there's not a book to solve that problem. Yeah, there is. Billions of people have lived before us. Millions of them have written books. Thousands of those books are applicable to your life and probably have the solution to the problem you're currently facing. So spend some time, find the book that can help you overcome the problem, read it properly, implement it properly. And for $20 and a few hours of your time, you can remove something that's probably been that's probably been creating pain on a daily basis for a long time. Life doesn't have to be so hard. I think that's kind of my final message. Doesn't have to be so fancy. It doesn't have to be so hard.
Hell yeah. And it might take 9 failures to get to that 10th success. Hell yeah. Well, Nick, thank you so much with Book Thinkers, spending time with us today. Can't wait to catch up very soon, and looking forward to reading the book when it comes out, because I pre-ordered it. So if for whatever reason you want to give me an early copy to read, I'm down. I can talk about it all day because I want to read that. But anyway, dude, thank you so much for making time.
Yeah, man, I'll get you a copy. Once I have some, I'm still waiting for mine. But yeah, thank you for the amazing conversation. And if anybody in your audience wants a personalized book recommendation, it's one of my favorite things to do. So head over to Instagram, check out Book Thinkers, shoot me a DM, tell me a problem you're facing, tell me a skill that you want to improve. I'll probably ask some follow-up questions, and then I'll follow up with you. 36 months later, I've got a whole little spreadsheet thing. So it's one of my favorite things to do. And that's available to anybody that's listening or watching today.
Oh yeah. All right, Nick. Till